For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment made in order by the rule.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 3, printed in Part B of House Report number 113-340, offered by Mr. Bera of California.
Pursuant to House Resolution 472, the gentleman from California, Mr. Bera, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Bera.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this amendment is simple. Supporters of this bill argue that it won't negatively impact upstream users. My constituents are these upstream users. My amendment protects upstream users, adding safeguards for the 5 California Delta counties. It guarantees that this politically motivated water grab would not harm the quality, quantity, or safety of drinking water supplies for these residents. California is in the middle of a crisis. We need real solutions, not political solutions. Last year was our driest year on record, and the snowpack where the state gets over 1/3 of its water is at record lows. We all agree there's a problem. So let's sit down, Democrats and Republicans, and let's work to find solutions together, not pit one community against another. In the meantime, let's not sacrifice one community. This amendment ensures that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from California reserves. The gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, for what purpose does he seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to claim time in opposition to the amendments.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, like Tennyson's rotting mackerel by the moonlight, this amendment shines and it stinks. It states the obvious, that the bill will not harm Delta drinking water supplies. Well, of course it won't. After all, the Delta counties are senior to the Central Valley in their water rights, and so they have first call on that water. And under this bill, no agency of the state or federal government can take that right away. Furthermore, under this bill, the Delta counties can also reuse environmental water that would otherwise have been lost to the ocean, making this the ultimate water recycling bill. This bill in no way affects the quality of drinking water in the Delta or anywhere else. The proof of that is in the fact that in the years following adoption of the Bay Delta Accord, which H.R. 3964 merely restores, never was it suggested by any water agency that their drinking water or agricultural water was adversely affected in any way, shape, or form. But by placing this provision in the bill, it immediately opens it up to litigation up in the courts for years. The mere allegation by a single litigant, no matter how outlandish, no matter how contorted, could stall these vitally needed reforms. It would also give this administration the ability to claim a right to nullify this law based on such a fiction. In fact, a few years ago, before the drought, when Central Valley water was being diverted for the Delta smelt, I confronted the Secretary of the Interior and the Natural Resources Committee. I pointed out that with thousands of farm workers unemployed, with 250,000 acres of prime farmland destroyed, with food lines in the agricultural capital of the West, with unemployment in some of these communities reaching 45%, he had the authority to suspend the diversions and to restore that water to the valley to stop this human tragedy. He acknowledged that he had that authority, but he wouldn't use it, he said, because doing so would be like admitting failure. Well, this amendment before us would give the same administration the excuse to ignore reality and act on ideological whim. This amendment, when it was offered 2 years ago, was rejected on a bipartisan vote of 177 to 243 in this House. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California reserves. The gentleman from California, Mr. Bera, is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I yield to my colleague from California, Mr. Thompson, 2 minutes.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Chairman, I rise in support of this amendment. California is facing a severe statewide drought. This drought is having a devastating impact on families all across our state, and this bill will only make things worse for many. It will jeopardize the drinking water for millions of Californians. In my district, families from Contra Costa and Solano counties get their drinking water from the Delta. This supply is already limited due to the extreme drought. This bill wants to pump that limited drinking water south. Doing this would flood the Delta with seawater, and people can't drink seawater. That's why this is so important. It simply says that this bill shall not harm the Delta's very limited drinking water supply. I urge a yes vote on the amendment, and I thank the gentleman from Sacramento for bringing it to the floor. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California reserves.
Great.
Mr. Bera reserves. Gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock,
Mr. Chairman,
is
we're
recognized.
ready to close when the gentleman from California is.
Gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, is ready to close. So, gentleman from California, Mr. Bera, is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, from my perspective, this is stating the obvious. Let's protect the water rights, the quality, and of the users in my community in Northern California. You know, if it's in the bill, this just codifies that. It just makes sure that folks in the 5 Delta counties, when they turn on their taps, can get water, clean water, quality water. So if it's in the bill, there's no reason not to vote yes on this and codify it and make sure we're protecting those families in Northern California. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman from California, Mr. Bera, yields back. The gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to yield the balance of our time to the distinguished gentleman from California who introduced the predecessor to this bill 2 years ago, the Honorable Devin Nunes.
The gentleman from California, Mr. Nunes, is recognized for 2 3/4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from California for yielding. So, Mr. Speaker, not only this amendment, but the last amendment, it's about one thing. Let's not be fooled here. It's about sewer discharge from the communities that are in the Delta that continue to dump their sewer water, runoff water, into the Delta. They don't want to have to take responsibility for their actions. So I hate to have to keep going back to this, but we're going to have to go back to it again. There you see a discharge. Here's the communities, all dumping sewage into the Delta. That's all this is about. Both of these amendments. That's why you should vote against them. But what's interesting about this is that you've heard a lot of talk about the fish, because this is what the true believers really want to protect. They want to protect this little fish right here called the Delta smelt. This is what this is about. It's about the Endangered Species Act. It's about the biggest water grab in history and running people out of water to protect this little fish. But they just don't want to protect that fish. Oh no. That's not good enough, Mr. Speaker. They want to dump their sewer water and protect the smelt and protect, this is really inconvenient, they want to protect the striped bass. Now, the striped bass is not native to the Delta, but they want to protect it. You know why they want to protect it? Because they say that, fishermen, they want to fish, but conveniently, it's not native to the Delta. But guess what the striped bass eats? If you can see on your television screen, Mr. Speaker, see those little... It eats a smelt. It eats a smelt, Mr. Speaker. It's inconvenient little truth there. So they want to protect these and these. This one eats those. This is a problem that can't be fixed by people who want to protect little fish, Mr. Speaker. So, as we started out today, this is a bill that passed the last Congress. Had the Senate acted on it, we would not be in a situation that we are today. We are out of water because we are not using the infrastructure that our state has built and added on to over the last century. We decided to throw all that infrastructure away, not use it, dump the water out to the ocean. Now we have no more water left. And I yield back.
The gentleman's time's expired. All time having expired, the question is offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. Bera. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
I ask for a recorded
Gentleman
vote.
from California seeks a recorded vote. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California will be postponed.